Okay. Good evening, everybody. So this week's parsha, last week's parsha, and this week's parsha, we have the parashiyot of Kriyat Shema, the first and the second paragraph of Kriyat Shema, which we say every day, morning and evening. Some of the most, I guess, well-known psukim, some of the most familiar psukim. Many of us, I'm sure, know them by there. Sometimes the most familiar ones are the ones that are the least studied. We don't stop to think about what they actually mean. So let's look at one idea that emerges from these psukim in terms of the words we say in Kriyat Shema, which we say every day, and of course we read it in our parsha. So it says, "V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam, v'shiftecha b'veitecha, v'lechtecha v'derech, v'shochbecha uv'kumecha." And a simple understanding over here, this pasuk talking about the chiyuv of Talmud Torah, talking about learning, studying the words of Torah. It's talking about the Gemara learns out from here some of the parameters, definitions of saying Kriyat Shema itself as well, right? When you go to sleep and when you wake up, and there is a discussion in the Gemara exactly what is the time frame in which we can say Kriyat Shema. There is a limited time, both evening and night, when you can say the Shema. The first Mishnah, Sechet Brachot, right? Me'ematai korin et Shema ba'avit. So when is the time? So b'shoch b'chav kumecha, the Gemara there discusses, because that doesn't necessarily refer to day or night, it refers to the time that people go to sleep, the time that people wake up, etc. That is one of the discussions that comes out of this. But of course, these psukim as well, talking in a broader sense, not just about Kriyat Shema, but in terms of the chiyuv of Talmud Torah. And there are two ways, essentially, to read this pasuk. One way, probably more, but we will focus on two. One is to say, "V'shinantam levanecha," is one matter, is one din, one halacha, one in, right? "V'shinantam levanecha," you will teach it to your children. Children over here in this pasuk, as I'll point out, doesn't just refer to biological children, refers to students, refers to anybody, but you'll teach it. Number one, teach Torah, "V'shinantam levanecha," teach it to your children, teach it to your students, etc. That's the end of that. That's part A. Part B, something else. So we have "V'shinantam levanecha," and then we have "V'dibarta bam." Not only you should teach it to others, you need to study it for yourself. Talk about it. Right? When you're sitting at home, when you're going out in the meal during the summer vacation, when you're at night, in the morning, etc. I remember once a few years ago, I had the opportunity to go to the Conference of European Rabbis in Antwerp. I was on the way there. I was on Shlichut in London at the time, so the train from London to Brussels. I remember from Brussels to Antwerp, sitting on the train, and sitting opposite me on the train was somebody who I didn't recognize. Looked quite rabbinic. Assumed we were going to the same place. We started talking, and he says, "What's your name?" And I tell him, and then I say, "Mikvodo, who is he?" Didn't recognize him. He was a very prominent dayan in Europe. It was a little bit embarrassing. I didn't know who he was, but anyway, that was how it went. And we were sitting, and after a few minutes of small talk, he turns to me, he says, somebody else in the carriage as well. But he turns around and he says, "Tov." He says, "Bona kayem mitzvatu v'lechtecha v'derech." He says, "Let's now fulfill the mitzvah of v'lechtecha v'derech." And with no books in front of him and no papers or anything, he went on. It was during the time of Sfirat HaOmer. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he started going into a Tosfot and this and that. There was he gave a whole show clearly there on the train, just off the top of his head. That was something, it was very inspiring. That was V'lechtecha v'derech. But there you have it. The Torah is telling us when it comes to the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, it's not a mitzvah tasei man grama, right? It's not a time-bound mitzvah all the time, day, night, at home, out, on vacation, etc. So those are the two parts. V'shinantam levanecha, teach it to others, v'dibarta bam, and learn it for yourself. Those are the two separate mitzvot, two things which go hand in hand. That is one way of reading the pasuk. That is one understanding. The other understanding, which builds on the first, is to say, no, you're mistaken. These are not two separate things. Rather, the second part of the pasuk is really a commentary on the first one. It's an explanation of the first one. How do you fulfill the mitzvah of v'shinantam levanecha? Teach it to others. How do you do that? The way that you will teach, the way that you'll influence others, the way that you'll inspire others is not by telling them what to do, it's by doing it yourself. It's by leading by example, right? The way in order to teach is by this is what you talk about. Whether you're at home, whether you're out, whatever it is, you sit around the table. You don't just talk about the politics or the sports results, which in this country are one and the same. I always say politics is the national sport of Israel, probably because we aren't really any good at any of the others. We're not too good at that one at the moment either, but never mind. That's for another time. But you don't talk about that. You talk about Torah, you talk about these things. By virtue of the fact that you are fulfilling that you're talking about it, so mimele, automatically, the result will be you will therefore teach others, you will therefore inspire others. They will look to emulate your example. We all know this intuitively. Right? People don't learn from us. We don't learn from others by what they tell us to do. But stop the share, right? But not by what they tell us to do, by what we do, by following that example. And that is why, therefore, the Rambam is a beautiful formulation of this. In Sefer HaMitzvot of the Rambam, you find that there are not two separate mitzvot of learning Torah and teaching Torah. There are not two mitzvot in Sefer HaMitzvot. There's one mitzvah in Sefer HaMitzvot of the Rambam. He says, mitzvah lilmod Torah ulelamda. The mitzvah is to learn Torah and to teach it. It's one and the same, two sides of the same coin. The way that you ultimately teach is by learning yourself. Ultimately, the best way to learn is also by teaching. That's the other side of it. But that is maybe the message that is encapsulated here in this pasuk of Kriyat Shema. How are you going to teach to others? By the fact that you are engaged in it, the fact that you are learning it yourself, that will ultimately teach others. And we have many expressions of this, many different places in halakha and sources where we find this idea. I'll mention just two of them, maybe three, if we have time. So one is, there's an interesting Gemara in Shabbat. Gemara Masechet Shabbat, Perek Bameh Madlikin, goes through the laws of Hadlakat Nerot. Talks about the different oils and wicks that one needs to, which one is able to light Shabbos candles. From there goes on to a tangent about Hanukkah candles, which ones can you use? Somebody asked me actually a few weeks ago, why does the Gemara go into such detail? Why is there a whole big discussion? Which wicks can we use? Which oils can we use? Again, the premise of the question is somewhat flawed. Nowadays, we don't have that question because we go into the shop and we buy candles and all the candles work very well. Once upon a time, it didn't work that way. You didn't have wax candles. You had your clay jugs. You put the oil inside. You put the wick inside. Some wicks caught better. Some oils burnt better, etc. And the Gemara therefore goes through. Certain oils can be used for Hanukkah. Certain oils can be used for Shabbos. Certain can be used for both. Certain can't be used for both. Goes through all the long discussion there in the Gemara as to what can or can't be used. And there's a statement there in the Gemara. It says, Amar Avuna. It says the Gemara in Shabbos, I think it's Tav Kaf Bet. It says, Haragil B'ner, Havi Banim Tamidei Chachamim. Somebody who is Ragil B'ner, somebody who is accustomed to this mitzvah of Ner. Now the Gemara also doesn't single out, is it talking about Ner Shabbat or Ner Chanukah? Rashi says probably both. But somebody who is fulfills this mitzvah, Ragil B'ner, is going to have children who are Talmidei Chachamim. So you read this Gemara. How do we understand? What's the connection? Rashi says, based on the pasuk, it says Ner Mitzvah B'Torah Or, like the light of the candle symbolizes the light of the Torah. Therefore, there is some sort of connection. Now, is there some skula? That's what we would think when we read the Gemara. There is some skula. Okay, certain mitzvot have a certain power, right? If you fulfill this mitzvah, in the merit of that mitzvah, you may get a certain reward. Okay, that's one way of reading it. There's a much simpler explanation. That you read the Gemara, when the Gemara says again, Haragil B'ner, and again, this is unusual to us because now we have electric lights, so we're not Ragil B'ner in this way. But once upon a time, the Ner was the only light that you had. So a person, Ragil B'ner, does not just refer to somebody who fulfills the mitzvah every week of lighting the Shabbat candles or of lighting the Hanukkah candles. It means Ragil B'ner, you've lit those candles and you sit by the candle. You sit there by the candle and you learn. You've got the Sefer open for hours into the night. So somebody who is Ragil B'ner, somebody who is accustomed to sitting next to the candle, somebody who's accustomed to sitting at home with the Sefer and sitting and learning and fulfilling this, It's going to be more likely. There's never a guarantee, and things happen, and there are cheshbonot of shamayim as to how things work out. But if you are going to be leading by example, the person who is going to be sitting and learning and showing that that's the most important thing, so then the children are going to see that, and they're going to follow in that way, and they'll have the ability to learn as well, and to want to emulate that, and therefore become Talmidei Chachamim. So that is one. It's an idea. I remember somebody told me as well a few years ago. There was a certain individual I know who said his father used to wake up every Shabbat morning, hours before. He would wake up in the morning and he would go and he would do a Shnai Mikra with Rashi on the whole parsha. He would always, his childhood memory is that whenever he woke up on Shabbat, he knew that his father wouldn't eat or wouldn't go to daven. I can't remember exactly, but he would make sure every morning he sat for hours learning Rashi on the parsha. And he said for years he thought that that's what that's what everybody did. He said he was shocked the first time he found out that there were people who don't. That's not the way they spend they spend the Shabbos morning. So that's the idea there as well. There's another place where we see this. It's very interesting. Parashat Achrei Mot. We're coming up to Yom Kippur soon, in a few months' time. So again, when you goes through the avodah of the Kohen Gadol and the whole service for Yom Kippur, so there are a number of times where the Kohen comes along and he does the vidui, he does the confession. It says v'cheper ba'ado uvad beito uvad kol Yisrael. There are 3 concentric circles. He has to come and do confession for himself, and then for his bad beito, for his family, for his household, and then again for everybody, for all of Am Yisrael. Once again, and the question is asked: surely that he himself is part of his household, and surely his household is part of Am Yisrael. Why is it separated? Why is it done in that way? And again, the message is the same idea that we're saying. In order to influence others, in order to inspire others, one has to look inward first. Not about what we say, but it's about what we do, and it's about the messages that we say. And I think we see this later on in the parasha as well, in a very interesting way. So we mentioned V'shinantam levanecha v'divat. The psukim of Kriyat Shema mention another daily mitzvah, which is the mitzvah of tefillin. You know that there are 2 components to tefillin. There is the tefillin shel yad and the tefillin shel rosh. Lots of, again, many long and elaborate discussions in halacha. How do we view it? Do we view it as 2 separate mitzvot? Do we view it as one mitzvah together in a certain way? The shel yad and shel rosh are separate mitzvot. In a certain way, they are considered one mitzvah. That is why we have a machloket rishonim in terms of the brachot. Sephardi custom is only to say 1 bracha when you put on tefillin. Ashkenazi custom is to say 2 brachot, etc. But maybe it's the same idea is being hinted at over here. In terms of the tefillin shel yad, that which is on the arm, which represents action, represents what I'm going out and what I'm doing in the physical world, the spiritual capacity as well, but it represents action, represents what I do. The tefillin shel rosh, which goes on my head, that represents thought, that represents vision, that represents the ideal, that represents the dream. Again, I can talk about the fact, I can think that it's important, but I have to go out and do it. And that's why maybe I thought in the parasha which talks about milchama, talks about when we go out to war, and there are certain categories of people who come back, who don't go out to war, right? Somebody who has built a new house but is not yet consecrated, etc., would come back lest they go out and lest they be killed in the milchama. One of the categories is somebody who is fearful. Somebody who is fearful because of the sins that he may have committed, and he may be worried that he does not have, therefore, the merit that he's going to survive in this world. So says the Gemara, what is the sin that a person would be afraid of? It says somebody who has an interruption, who talks between the tefillin shel, putting on the tefillin shel yad and the tefillin shel rosh. We ask, that's the greatest sin that exists out there, the interrupting between tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh. Again, maybe what's being hinted to, what's being alluded to in this idea is that there can't be an interruption, there can't be a hefsek between the shel yad and the shel rosh, meaning it's not enough to have these ideas in our head, to have these abstract ideas and concepts. We have to act on them. We have to do as well. That is the tefillin shel yad together with the tefillin shel rosh. That is maybe the idea of the shinantam levanecha, teaching to others, talking about it, thinking about it, but also v'dibat abam, making sure that it's something that we fulfill, and in that way that we fulfill it, we will be able to inspire others, to inspire ourselves in such a way. רבי חנניה בן הקשה אומר שהקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל, לפיכך בא להם תורה מצוות, שנאמר זה נחפץ מהצדקו, יגדיר תורה וידע.
Amen.